What is the best way to work? Some people prefer to work individually and some people like to work as a team. But I would say there's always like specific tasks for each of them, and finding out those specific things will give you a better understanding which one would be better. It's me, Selam from Peace Up Creatives, as always, and today we'll take a look at the advantage and disadvantage of working alone and working as a team. So let's get into it. As a startup, when we think of working together or alone, we need to find out a better or the best way of working together and effectively making tasks, executing tasks. And usually when we decide to work alone or in a group, we need to consider like a lot of factors. But sometimes that's not even the case. The job or the task by itself will decide whether we need to do that alone or we need to do that in a group of team. So I just wanted to ask you guys if you have anything in mind, which jobs requires a team and which kind of tasks requires you or demands you to work on it alone. So let me see that in the comments, and that might give us an idea of which directions you guys are perceiving this, and that would encourage some conversations even between you guys. So I'm very interested to see that in the comments. So working as a team, let's see the advantage of working as a team first. So when you're working as a team, the first and the biggest advantage that it gives anybody is there is a lot of people involved. So there's going to be a lot of brainstorming, there's going to be a lot of ideas and collaborations. So that is always better than just one idea. So that's one of the advantages of working as a team. So the other one is whenever there's a problem, more than one person is better than just a single person to solve that problem. So because of different perspectives and experience and things like that, the tendency of the problem being solved get more advantage than just one person working on that specific things. So that's another advantage of working as a team. So the third one is everybody passes through their own ways. So when you're working as a team, one person might perceive things in one way, but the other person might think of it in a completely different way. So the experience, the skills and things like that gives the team, the whole entire team, or even the task that is given to be solved, it gives it more opportunity to be seen from different angles. So that's another advantage of working as a team. The last but not the least one is mainly focus on communication. So whenever you work together with different skills, different talents, that's when you get to see how to communicate with those talents, how to collaborate, and how to work together to actually give a solution to one specific task. So communication, now everybody calls their company maybe this communication and that communication. Then the biggest issue in every communication company is actually communication. So that's a big issue in any kind of work and in any kind of task. So communication gets better and better when you're working together. So you get to communicate, you can talk to each other, and every time that will increase your way of communication, skill of communication to one another every single time. So that's one of the big advantages of working as a team. So now let's see the disadvantage. Let's go to the other side and let's discuss about, most of you might know most of the things that I'm saying right now, but now we can talk about it, we can discuss about it, and finally we get to see it in a different directions so that we can understand it better, because we've been through it and I'm sure most of you are going through it or being through it. So the first disadvantage of working as a team is sometimes there are people who just sit down and let somebody else do all the tasks. So in that case, the person who's doing all the tasks will suffer a lot, and after the task is done, maybe that person might share your credits or benefits or anything. So in that case, that's a big disadvantage because you're doing more, but that person is not doing anything, and you get discouraged, and there will be even the job by itself might be affected by the miscommunication in between you guys. So that's the first big disadvantage of working as a team. So that actually tells us who to work, we should be careful about who to choose while working together. So that's one thing. So the other one is when you're working as a team, there's always going to be like meetings, discussions, and things like that. And if those things are not managed well, one thing you might go out of topic and start discussing about like a bunch of things which should not be mentioned or raised at that point, which are no relevance for the task that's being given. So in those kind of situations, it takes more time. So the job or the task might get delayed for like longer time than it should, and things like that might happen. So if it is not managed well, meetings and discussions have their own disadvantage, which always happens when you're working as a team. So that's another thing. So the last one that I have on the list is making decision. So when you're trying to make a decision while working as a team, it doesn't go well all the time. So because sometimes you might agree on the same ideas or same conclusions, but most of the time you might disagree to one another. So unless you have like a ground rule of maybe somebody having a veto power over like the decision-making process or some kind of solution for that, usually gets very, very tough, and you might even get to a bigger disargument between your colleagues and the people who are working with you. So those kind of things might happen. That's another big disadvantage of working as a team. So now let's jump into the advantage of working alone or working as a freelance, or call it whatever, but anything that you decided to do it alone. So the first one is whenever you do any tasks, you get to do it on your pace. So you don't have to rush, you don't have to discuss that with anybody else. You just need to do it by your own pace and by your own speed. You don't have to relate to anything else, so everything is on your hands. So that gives you a bigger power on the project that you're doing. So that's one of the big advantages of working individually. So the other one is you can concentrate on what you're doing much better than while working as a team. So while working as a team, you might talk to this person, that person, discussions, blah, 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 blah. But when you're working alone, there's nothing that distracts you from what you're doing. You get better focus. So you do things much faster because there's nothing distracting you and stuff like that. So that's another advantage of working as an individual or alone. So another thing is whenever you do things while working alone or while working as an individual on that specific thing, after its completion, you get all the benefits and credits on your own. So you get all the, if it is payment, you get the whole payment. If it is credit, you get the whole credit, and that's one of the big advantages of working as an individual. So another one is exactly what we mentioned as a disadvantage on working as a team. It becomes an advantage while working alone. So that's the last thing that we mentioned, was making decisions. It's always tough, and people usually end up on different opinions, so different perspectives on a single thing. So, but while working alone, that's not gonna happen because it's just you and you. So you get to make all the decision by yourself. So it gives you all the power to, choose whatever you want. So the power of decision rests on your hands. So that gives you bigger power. So that's another advantage. So now let's jump into the disadvantage of working as an individual. Of course, there's always the two sides are always going to stay together. So there's an advantage and there's also a disadvantage. So the first one is whenever you work on a specific thing on your own, you're responsible for that. So if that thing fails, if that thing didn't work, or if something happened to that specific project, you're going to be the only responsible person for that, and anybody else would not care about what happens. So that's a bigger disadvantage about like working individually, because you might panic about that thing and there's nobody to calm you down or to actually talk to, things like that. So you'll be the only person who's going to be responsible for that thing. So that's the first thing. So the other thing is when you're working alone, the only thing that you're going to do, or the only way of solution that you're going to make, it's your own way. So if that method is wrong, the only way you can learn from it is after you're done with it or after you make the mistake. So that makes the learning process very longer. You can't learn from anybody else. You can't have like different experiments, different ideas from different people because you're just alone. So that makes the learning process, or you're improving your skill, takes longer in this kind of process. So that's one of the other disadvantages. So for anybody, especially for a creative person, working alone might get frustrating sometimes because your brain is like, consuming a lot of things from your body, and other than like eating and recreation stuff, you need something to motivate you. So while working as a team, you might just stop doing whatever you're doing, and you might get motivation from different directions from your friends and colleagues and things like that. But when you're working alone, you have to motivate yourself. And that takes a lot, and everybody knows that. I mean, even at this point, me, I don't like to just sit down for a long period of time and work on one specific thing unless I have to, because at some point my brain stops thinking, and all I can think of is maybe going out, have a coffee and things like that. So because of there's somebody else in the room, in the company, I get to talk to them and distract myself from whatever my mind is telling me. So, but while working alone, that usually doesn't happen. So you have to motivate yourself every single time. So that's a huge deal. So this one actually goes along with motivation, but being by yourself by its own, some people might be able to do it and will be comfortable, but for majority of people, just working alone by like nobody around, that makes things a bit not frustrating, but sometimes frustrating, but sometimes boring, makes it very weird environment to actually be, relaxed and feel free to spend more time on that thing. So that by itself, being alone by itself, has its own big effect on the work environment and the speed and pace of your improvising, things like that here. So when you're alone, that makes it a bit difficult, in my opinion. So that's another thing. So the last point that I have on this video is the last disadvantage of working as an individual is you're a human being. So every time something happens, you might get sick, some accident might happen, or like you might be in an urgent situation. So in that case, there's nobody else to take over your project or your task and execute it until you become capable of finishing the job on your own even, or you might not even be capable for a longer period of time. So, the task or the project might get delayed or not even going to be done in some cases. So in this kind of situations, there's nobody else to back you up and, fill your food and be there and work on the things that you've been doing, because you're just alone. So that makes it a bit difficult, makes it more riskier especially for the person who wants the job to get done, who the employee or whoever gives you the contract, or somebody's who wants that job or tasks to be done. So they don't have anybody else because they trust you, but you're just alone and there's nobody else. So that's another big disadvantage when it comes to working alone. So I'm sure these are not the only advantage. I'm not saying these are the only advantage and disadvantage of working alone versus individual, but there are a lot of things that you might have in mind. So always feel free to comment below, and we'll try to cover those things and other videos. So feel free to always tell us what you have in mind and things. If I missed something in this video, or if you think I should have mentioned something, always feel free to leave it in the comments. And the other things are like relating to this topic. One of the reasons that I wanted to do this video first is I relate to this two-sided working environments in my whole entire career, because I've been a freelancer and I worked alone, and now even before I joined a company where there was a bunch of talents, like I mentioned in my previous video, and I've seen the pros and cons in different environments. So one thing like I always give big emphasis is that whenever you decide to work as a team, you have to really be careful who you're working with. Because if you don't have like a similar vision, passion, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the similar talent and things like that, it has to be like different, because the collaboration of those different talents will make something big. But if you want to grow and go to the next level every time, it requires more than you. So especially on a creative field. So that happens a lot. So my big advice is that every time be careful who you're dealing with. So when you choose somebody to work with, so you have to at least know the basic ideologies of that person. Like, you don't have to agree all the time, but you have to have the same energy and the same motivation and things like that to actually make things done. So while working individually, I also learned a lot of things, and I also made a lot of mistakes because it's just me. So it's all my perceptions and things like that. So every time, whenever I push things, it's just on my conditions. So that actually taught me a lot of things in life. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. You know, at some point of your life, everybody needs to see that, especially as a creative talent. But it shouldn't take long, you know? You should stay in that kind of environment for a small period of time, in my opinion. And whenever you try to expand, it's always going to require something other than you. So you have to, you know, agree with that and actually try to find people who are capable of working in the situations that you want to work with. Maybe find another person who have like the same passion as you and things like that. So one thing that I want to mention, when you're working as a team or when you're developing a team for a company and things like that, one thing you need to consider is that unless there is like multiple way of contribution for that specific task or whatever you're trying to achieve in the company, it's going to be very difficult just by yourself to go all through to the other level that you desire to go. So it's always to consider like different variety of talent, at the same time variety of experience and opinions. And that's not a bad thing at all, but it gives like very significant amount of inputs for the task or for the vision that you want to achieve. So it's a good thing. So the other thing that I would like to mention before I end this video is there's going to be, I'm sure there's multiple ways of solving this kind of issues while working alone or in a team that you guys might use or been using for a long time. So this is an experience sharing program. I would like you guys to actually tell us about those kinds of methods that you use. You can use the comments and you can like directly message us or anything, but we'd really like to hear from you guys what methods and tricks that you use to solve these kind of issues. So I hope this is helpful for most of you who are watching this video, and I'll be seeing you with another video in the coming episodes. Until then, be safe, take care, and have a nice day. Goodbye.